Despite countless investigations, theories, and media coverage, crucial questions still linger, leaving both investigators and the public searching for answers. One of the most enduring mysteries revolves around the ransom note. Who wrote it, and why would the perpetrator leave such a lengthy, detailed message inside the house? The specificity of the ransom demand $118,000 continues to raise suspicions due to its connection to John Ramsey's year-end bonus. Was this an attempt to frame someone close to JonBenet, or did the author have intimate knowledge of the family's financial situation? The unidentified male DNA found on JonBenet's clothing remains another significant puzzle. Despite advances in forensic technology, no match has ever been found in national databases. Could this DNA have originated from secondary transfer, perhaps during the manufacturing or packaging of her clothing? Or does it belong to a yet-to-be-identified assailant who managed to evade capture for decades? The state of the crime scene also poses unresolved questions. No clear evidence of forced entry was found, and the basement window often suggested as a possible entry point showed no signs of recent disturbance. If an intruder was responsible, how did they enter and exit the house without leaving behind more physical evidence? The motive behind JonBenet's death is another lingering enigma. Was it a kidnapping attempt that escalated unexpectedly, a crime of opportunity, or a premeditated act by someone close to the family? The presence of the garrote, along with evidence of blunt force trauma, suggests a crime driven by rage or sadistic intent, yet no suspect has ever been definitively linked to these details. Another unsettling question concerns the role of the Boulder Police Department's early missteps. Did the mishandling of the crime scene and the initial focus on the Ramsey family allow the real perpetrator to slip through the cracks? Could vital evidence have been lost or compromised in those critical early hours after JonBenet's body was discovered? The lack of clear suspects continues to frustrate both law enforcement and the public. Over the years, several individuals have been investigated, including local sex offenders and people with ties to the Ramsey family, but none have ever been charged. False confessions and dead-end leads have further muddied the waters, leaving investigators with little to build on. Despite the passage of time, interest in the case remains high, with ongoing calls for new DNA testing using the latest technology. Some experts believe that a fresh examination of the evidence could finally reveal the identity of JonBenet's killer, bringing closure to a mystery that has cast a shadow over Boulder, Colorado, for more than 25 years. Until that day comes, the case of JonBenet Ramsey stands as a chilling reminder of how even the most high-profile investigations can leave more questions than answers. On Christmas morning, 1996, the Ramsey family seemed to embody the ideal of suburban success and happiness. John Ramsey, a successful businessman, his wife Patsy, a former beauty queen, and their two children, Burke and JonBenet, lived in a luxurious home in Boulder, Colorado. The family's youngest member, 6-year-old JonBenet, had already made a name for herself as a child beauty pageant star, her angelic face gracing countless photographs and local television segments. By all appearances, the Ramseys W. But beneath the shimmering decorations and festive cheer, a nightmare was about to unfold, one that would forever alter the lives of the Ramseys and captivate the world for decades to come. The morning after Christmas, Patsy Ramsey made a frantic 911 call, reporting that her daughter was missing. She claimed to have found a ransom note demanding $118,000 for JonBenet's safe return, an oddly specific sum that matched John Ramsey's recent bonus from work. The note's peculiarities, including its length and unusual. As police arrived at the Ramsey home, what should have been a controlled investigation quickly descended into chaos. Friends and family arrived at the house, contaminating the crime scene unintentionally, while officers, unprepared for a case of this magnitude, allowed vital evidence to be compromised. Hours later, in a horrifying twist, John Ramsey discovered his daughter's body in the basement of their own home, hidden beneath a white blanket, with duct tape over her mouth and a garrote fashioned from a page. The tragedy sent shockwaves through the quiet community of Boulder and soon became a media sensation. The image of JonBenet in her pageant dresses, with her bright eyes and innocent smile, was splashed across newspapers and television screens worldwide. The story had all the elements to grip the public imagination: wealth, beauty, and an unspeakable crime committed in a seemingly safe and privileged household. What followed was a whirlwind of speculation, finger-pointing, and media frenzy. From the very beginning, suspicion fell on the family itself, though others believed an intruder had somehow entered the house undetected. As the investigation unraveled, it became clear that the truth behind JonBenet Ramsey's death was far more complicated and more tragic than anyone could have imagined. This was not just the story of a young girl's murder but a mystery that would haunt investigators, the media, and the public. The morning of December 26, 1996, began with panic and confusion inside the Ramsey household. Patsy Ramsey, rising early to start the day, discovered a 2.5-page ransom note sprawled across the staircase leading from the kitchen. The note was strange, longer than typical ransom notes and filled with dramatic phrases that seemed pulled straight from a Hollywood thriller. The demand for $118,000, a curiously specific amount, raised immediate suspicions, as it matched John Ramsey's recent work bond. The Boulder Police Department responded quickly, but critical mistakes were made from the very beginning. Rather than treating the house as a potential crime scene, officers allowed friends and family to gather inside the home, unintentionally contaminating potential evidence. Hours passed without any sign of JonBenet, leaving the family in a state of unbearable suspense. Then, in a devastating twist, John Ramsey discovered his daughter's body himself. Around 1 p.m., at the urging of a police detective, John began searching the house with a family friend, Fleet White. In the basement, John opened a small, rarely used storage room, and there, under a white blanket, lay JonBenet. Duct tape covered her mouth, and a garrote fashioned from a broken paintbrush was around her neck. The horror was undeniable. John carried his daughter's body upstairs and placed her on the floor, unintentionally compromising key forensic evidence in the process. In their grief-stricken state, no one realized how crucial the preservation of the crime scene would be. The investigation, already hindered by earlier errors, was now severely compromised. The autopsy report later revealed chilling details. JonBenet had sustained a blow to the head, likely causing her death, while the garrote indicated strangulation. There were also signs of possible sexual assault, though the evidence was inconclusive. These findings complicated the investigation, raising questions about whether the motive was sexual, personal, or the result of a horrific accident covered up in haste. The discovery of JonBenet's body inside her own home immediately shifted the focus of the investigation inward. To many investigators, it seemed implausible that an intruder could have carried out such a crime without leaving clear evidence of forced entry or being noticed by the family. The ransom note, combined with the location of the body and the peculiar circumstances of the crime scene, pointed toward someone who had intimate knowledge of the household. The tragedy of that morning was only the beginning of a far more complex mystery, one that would see every member of the Ramsey family scrutinized in the harshest possible light. In the weeks that followed, what should have been a straightforward investigation devolved into a media circus, and the questions surrounding JonBenet's death became more tangled with every passing day. Among the most perplexing elements of the JonBenet Ramsey case was the ransom note discovered by Patsy Ramsey on the morning of December 26, 1996. The note, sprawling across 2.5 pages, was unusually long, far lengthier than most ransom notes, which are typically brief and to the point. Its contents were both dramatic and oddly theatrical, filled with phrases seemingly lifted from popular films, including references resembling dialogue from action thrillers like Dirty Harry and Speed. The note demanded a ransom of $118,000, a bizarrely specific figure that raised immediate suspicions. This amount was almost identical to John Ramsey's Christmas bonus that year, leading investigators to believe the author had intimate knowledge of the family's finances. Could this have been an attempt to personalize the crime? Or was it a red herring designed to divert suspicion toward the family? Another peculiarity was the tone of the note. Instead of the cold, direct language typical of ransom demands, the message was strangely conversational and filled with emotional flourishes. Phrases such as, "We respect your business but not the country that it serves," seemed out of place for a typical kidnapper. Some investigators speculated that the note was written in an attempt to stage a crime scene, creating the illusion of a kidnapping gone wrong. Handwriting experts were brought in to analyze the note, with Patsy Ramsey initially falling under scrutiny due to similarities between her handwriting and the note. However, multiple experts ultimately concluded that the evidence was inconclusive. Despite extensive analysis, no definitive match was ever made between the note and any known handwriting samples from the Ramsey family or acquaintances. Adding to the mystery, investigators found no signs of forced entry into the Ramsey home. This raised the unsettling possibility that the ransom note could have been written by someone already inside the house, someone familiar with the family's routines and intimate details of their lives. Critics of the intruder theory pointed to this as evidence that the note was staged after the crime had already been committed. The peculiar length of the note suggested the author had taken considerable time to craft it, an odd detail if an intruder had been working under the pressure of committing a crime undetected. If the killer was a stranger, how could they have written such a lengthy message without fear of being caught? This question became a cornerstone of theories implicating members of the Ramsey family. Years after the crime, investigators revisited the ransom note with advanced forensic technology, but no new evidence emerged. The note remained a baffling piece of the puzzle, one that seemed to provide more questions than answers. To this day, the ransom note remains one of the most enigmatic aspects of JonBenet's tragic death. Was it a genuine attempt at extortion, or an elaborate piece of misdirection meant to cover up a far more personal crime? From the moment JonBenet Ramsey's murder hit the headlines, the case became a lightning rod for intense media attention. The image of the 6-year-old beauty queen, adorned in makeup and dressed in pageant costumes, became an iconic and controversial symbol that dominated news cycles for months. Major news outlets across the United States dedicated countless hours to coverage, and tabloids seized on every new development, fueling a frenzy of public speculation that continues to this day. The media portrayal of the Ramsey family was deeply polarizing. Some outlets cast John and Patsy Ramsey as grieving parents caught in the crosshairs of a tragic crime, while others insinuated that their outward displays of composure were signs of guilt. Patsy Ramsey, in particular, faced harsh scrutiny due to her past involvement in beauty pageants, a detail that many commentators suggested played a role in JonBenet's participation in child beauty contests. To some, this raised uncomfortable questions about parental pressure, overexposure, and the objectification of children in American culture. As the investigation unfolded, leaks from within law enforcement added fuel to the media fire. Details about the ransom note, the crime scene, and the family's behavior were reported in real time, often without official confirmation. These leaks contributed to a growing atmosphere of suspicion around the Ramseys, with many members of the public becoming convinced of the family's guilt based solely on unverified reports. Television networks aired special segments dissecting the case, and major news magazines published cover stories with provocative headlines suggesting possible familial involvement. True crime shows and documentaries further sensationalized the mystery, often focusing more on the salacious elements of the case, such as JonBenet's pageant career, rather than the facts of the investigation itself. This relentless scrutiny had a devastating effect on the Ramsey family. They became virtual prisoners in their own home, targeted by journalists and photographers eager to capture their every move. Friends and acquaintances who supported the family were also drawn into the media storm, facing public suspicion simply by association. The media frenzy also influenced public perception of the Boulder Police Department's handling of the investigation. Critics accused the department of mishandling evidence and failing to control the flow of information to the press. The resulting narrative suggested that incompetence and media interference had compromised any chance of a fair investigation. In the years following JonBenet's death, the media's role in shaping public opinion became a subject of controversy in its own right. Proponents of this theory pointed to several unusual details at the crime scene and pieces of evidence that could suggest the presence of an outsider. One of the most significant arguments for the intruder theory involved a broken basement window in the Ramsey home. John Ramsey himself had mentioned breaking the window months earlier to regain access after being locked out. Though initially dismissed as unrelated, some investigators began to consider whether an intruder might have used this point of entry. Dust and cobwebs around the window appeared undisturbed, casting doubt on whether anyone had entered through it. Recently, but others argued that a skilled enter. Another key detail supporting the intruder theory was the presence of unidentified DNA on JonBenet's clothing. Years after the crime, advanced forensic testing detected male DNA that did not match any members of the Ramsey family or acquaintances. This discovery led some investigators to believe that an unknown assailant may have been responsible for the crime, even though the DNA was only a partial profile and could not be directly linked to any suspect in national databases. There were also unexplained disturbances around the Ramsey property. Some neighbors reported hearing strange noises during the night of the murder, including loud metallic sounds that could have been related to a break-in attempt. Additionally, there were reports of unusual footprints found in the snow near the house, though conflicting evidence about the snowfall and the pattern of footprints left this detail inconclusive. Critics of the intruder theory argue that it is unlikely a stranger could have carried out such a complex crime without leaving more substantial evidence. The length of the ransom note and the risk associated with spending so much time inside the house raised doubts about whether an intruder could have written the note without fear of discovery. Moreover, there were no clear signs of forced entry beyond the previously broken window. Despite these doubts, supporters of the intruder theory believe that the combination of unidentified DNA, neighborhood sightings of suspicious individuals, and the presence of potential entry points suggest the involvement of someone outside the Ramsey family. Several suspects have been proposed over the years, including known sex offenders in the Boulder area, but none have ever been definitively linked to the crime. The intruder theory remains one of the most debated aspects of the JonBenet Ramsey case. For many, it represents a potential answer to the lingering mystery and explanation that absolves the family while underscoring the tragic randomness of the crime. Yet, without conclusive evidence, the theory remains just that, a possibility forever shrouded in uncertainty. One of the most puzzling aspects of the JonBenet Ramsey case has always been the forensic evidence, particularly the DNA discovered on JonBenet's clothing. This evidence became the cornerstone of debates surrounding the crime, raising both hope for a resolution and frustration over unanswered questions. In the early stages of the investigation, forensic experts found trace amounts of unidentified male DNA on JonBenet's underwear and leggings. This discovery seemed to suggest the presence of an unknown assailant, someone not related to the family and potentially responsible for the crime. However, the amount of DNA found was minimal and degraded, making it difficult to draw definitive conclusions. Advancements in DNA testing over the years brought renewed attention to the case. In 2003, more sophisticated analysis methods confirmed that the DNA sample did not belong to any member of the Ramsey family. This revelation led the Boulder District Attorney's Office to officially clear the family of involvement in JonBenet's death in 2008. Many believed this discovery strengthened the intruder theory, suggesting that someone from outside the household had committed the crime. Yet, the forensic evidence raised as many questions as it answered. The DNA found on JonBenet's clothing did not match any profiles in national criminal databases, leaving investigators without a clear suspect. Additionally, some forensic experts suggested that the DNA could have come from secondary transfer, meaning it might have been deposited on her clothing during manufacturing or handling, rather than at the time of the crime. Compounding the confusion, fibers and other physical evidence found at the scene provided mixed signals. Some fibers matched clothing worn by Patsy Ramsey that evening, though the explanation could be as simple as shared living space and routine physical contact within the family. Other evidence, such as a broken paintbrush used to fashion the garrote, came from materials found within the home itself, which skeptics of the intruder theory argued was further proof that the crime could have been committed by S. Further complicating matters was the lack of signs of forced entry into the Ramsey home. Despite extensive forensic analysis, investigators never found conclusive evidence of how an intruder might have entered the property. The undisturbed snow around the house and the absence of clear footprints fueled skepticism toward the intruder theory. In recent years, calls for retesting the DNA evidence using modern techniques have intensified. Some experts believe that today's advanced forensic technology could provide clearer answers and potentially identify the source of the mysterious DNA. However, as of now, no definitive breakthroughs have emerged. The DNA evidence remains both a beacon of hope and a source of frustration in the JonBenet Ramsey case. While it has helped clear the Ramsey family of direct involvement, its unresolved nature continues to haunt investigators and the public alike, leaving a critical question unanswered: who left that DNA behind, and what secrets does it still hold? Among the most scrutinized figures in the JonBenet Ramsey case was her mother, Patsy Ramsey. A former beauty queen and an active participant in her daughter's pageantry career, Patsy's involvement in the case drew intense media and public attention. Over the years, speculation about her role ranged from suggestions of guilt to portrayals of her as a grieving mother unfairly vilified by both investigators and the press. Patsy was the one who made the initial 911 call on the morning of December 26, 1996, reporting that JonBenet was missing and reading from a ransom note she had allegedly discovered on the staircase. The fact that she found the note, combined with similarities between her handwriting and that of the note's author, placed her under immediate suspicion. Handwriting experts were divided on whether Patsy could have written the note, with some pointing out inconsistencies while others deemed the evidence inconsistent. Patsy's background as a pageant mother also became a focal point of media scrutiny. Critics accused her of imposing adult beauty standards on her young daughter, leading some theorists to speculate about the pressures JonBenet may have faced. While this narrative fueled public fascination, investigators found no evidence that linked Patsy's involvement in pageantry to the crime itself. Some investigators proposed the theory that Patsy might have accidentally harmed JonBenet in a moment of frustration, possibly over a bedwetting incident, an explanation that has been suggested in various documentaries and media reports. According to this theory, the ransom note was staged in an attempt to cover up the accidental death. However, forensic evidence never supported this theory, and no physical proof ever emerged that directly implicated Patsy in her daughter's death. In later interviews, Patsy maintained her innocence and consistently denied any involvement in the crime. Her behavior during the investigation, at times defensive and emotional, was interpreted by some as suspicious, while others viewed it as the understandable response of a grieving mother under intense public pressure. Patsy's public appearances, particularly her interviews on national television, were often dissected for signs of guilt or deception. Critics cited her tendency to deflect certain questions, while supporters argued that her behavior was consistent with trauma and stress from the tragic loss of her child. In 2006, Patsy Ramsey passed away from ovarian cancer, still maintaining her innocence until her final days. She died without ever being formally charged in connection with JonBenet's death, and the 2008 exoneration of the Ramsey family by the Boulder District Attorney's Office cleared her of any official suspicion. Today, Patsy's role in the JonBenet Ramsey case remains a point of fascination and debate. Whether viewed as a victim of a flawed investigation or a potential suspect whose actions were never fully understood, her involvement underscores the complexities of a case that continues to captivate the public more than 2 decades later. Burke Ramsey, JonBenet's older brother, was only 9 years old at the time of her tragic death. While initially shielded from public scrutiny, Burke eventually became a focal point of speculation as theories emerged suggesting that he may have played an unintended role in the events leading to his sister's death. Though law enforcement never formally named Burke as a suspect, the absence of concrete answers in the case allowed rumors and conjecture to flourish. One theory posited that Burke may have accidentally harmed JonBenet during a moment of sibling rivalry or frustration. Proponents of this theory suggested that a minor altercation could have escalated unintentionally, with the Ramseys staging a cover-up to protect their son from the consequences of his actions. This theory was fueled in part by autopsy findings that indicated JonBenet had suffered a severe head injury, consistent with blunt force trauma. However, investigators found no physical evidence. Further fueling speculation were the Ramseys' decisions regarding Burke's involvement in the investigation. The family initially limited police interviews with Burke, citing his young age and emotional vulnerability. While this was understandable given the traumatic circumstances, critics argued that it raised unnecessary suspicions about what Burke might have known. In 2016, nearly 2 decades after JonBenet's death, Burke Ramsey participated in a rare televised interview with Dr. Phil McGraw, offering his perspective on the tragedy and addressing the rumors surrounding his involvement. During the interview, Burke maintained his innocence, expressing frustration over being implicated by conspiracy theories and insisting that he had nothing to do with his sister's death. Following this interview, Burke filed a $750 million defamation lawsuit against CBS and others involved in producing a documentary that had implied his involvement in JonBenet's death. The lawsuit was eventually settled in 2019 for an undisclosed amount, though CBS did not issue a formal retraction. This legal action highlighted the ongoing tension between media speculation and the rights of individuals involved in high-profile criminal cases. Law enforcement agencies have repeatedly stated that there is no evidence linking Burke to the crime. DNA evidence collected from the crime scene did not match Burke or any member of the Ramsey family, further weakening the case for his involvement. Despite official exoneration, Burke Ramsey remains a controversial figure in the public's perception of the case. For some, his behavior during interviews perceived as awkward or unemotional fueled lingering suspicions. However, experts have emphasized that such behavior can be a natural response to trauma, especially in children who experience severe emotional distress. Today, Burke leads a private life, largely removed from the media spotlight. His involvement in the case remains a painful chapter in the larger story of the JonBenet Ramsey mystery, a reminder of how public fascination with true crime can sometimes overshadow the humanity of those who remain closest to the tragedy. The JonBenet Ramsey case has often been cited as a textbook example of how investigative missteps can derail the pursuit of justice. From the very beginning, law enforcement's handling of the crime scene raised serious concerns, leaving behind a legacy of errors that would shape the case for decades. One of the most significant mistakes occurred on the very day JonBenet's body was discovered. When police officers arrived at the Ramsey home following Patsy's 911 call, they allowed friends and family members to enter the house. This decision unintentionally contaminated the crime scene, as potential evidence was moved, touched, or otherwise compromised by people who were simply trying to comfort the grieving family. Even more damaging was the moment when John Ramsey, alongside a family friend, found JonBenet's body in the basement. Instead of leaving the crime scene undisturbed for forensic experts to examine, John picked up his daughter's body and carried her upstairs. While his actions were likely driven by grief and shock, this further compromised the forensic evidence and may have destroyed critical clues about how the crime was committed. Another key failure involved the mishandling of the ransom note. Rather than treating it as a vital piece of evidence, police allowed Patsy Ramsey to handle the note before it was photographed or properly examined. This compromised potential fingerprints or trace evidence that could have linked the note to the perpetrator. Internal conflicts within the Boulder Police Department also hindered the investigation. Disagreements between detectives and the district attorney's office over whether to focus on the Ramsey family or pursue alternative theories led to a fractured investigative strategy. While some officers were convinced the family was involved, others believed the evidence pointed toward an intruder. This lack of coordination allowed potential leads to fall through the cracks. Media leaks further complicated matters. Sensitive information from the investigation was frequently leaked to the press, often leading to sensationalized stories that influenced public perception. These leaks also made it difficult for investigators to differentiate between credible tips and rumors generated by media speculation. Despite the presence of DNA evidence that could have pointed investigators toward the real perpetrator, the initial focus on the Ramsey family diverted attention away from other potential suspects. This tunnel vision, combined with the mishandling of evidence, is often cited as a primary reason why the case remains unsolved. In later years, new police leadership acknowledged these early mistakes and attempted to refocus efforts on the DNA evidence. However, the damage had already been done. Critical early opportunities to collect uncontaminated evidence and interview witnesses in a controlled environment were lost forever. The missteps made during the early stages of the investigation serve as a painful reminder of how crucial proper crime scene management is to solving cases. For JonBenet Ramsey's family, these errors represent not just procedural failures but lost chances for justice in a mystery that continues to haunt the public consciousness. More than 2 decades after JonBenet Ramsey's tragic death, the case remains one of the most perplexing and haunting unsolved crimes in American history.